Putin has stolen Ukrainian children. Thousands of children have been abducted by Russia. Russia has repeatedly targeted the most vulnerable groups of children, including orphans, children with disabilities, children from poor families.
Why Canada is leading the fight to bring Ukraine's children home. Canada is stepping into one of the most difficult missions of this war, bringing abducted Ukrainian children home. Today, we explain Canada's role, what the plan looks like, and how we'll know if it's working. At a gathering in Kyiv, Canadian leaders joined a 42-member coalition focused on identifying, verifying, and returning Ukrainian children taken into Russia or Russian-occupied territory. Canada framed this as both a moral line and a legal one. Forced transfers of children are not just tragic, they're violations of international law. And there's a concrete target. Build lists of real cases, open channels for returns, and make reunification a non-negotiable part of any peace. Be sure to stick around to the end of this video, where you'll be able to see Mark Carney and Diana Fox Carney's full raw speech. Why Canada? Because this aligns with who we say we are, a country that leans into human rights work, international law, and coalition building. Canada also has one of the largest Ukrainian diasporas outside Ukraine. This isn't abstract, it's personal for many Canadians. So the message from Ottawa is simple. If children aren't going home, there isn't a real peace, just a pause. Here's the plan in 3 parts. Pressure, capability, and coordination. Pressure, use sanctions, potentially including secondary sanctions, to target the networks that enable deportations, forged documents, and identity laundering. Raise the cost of participation at every step. Capability, fund an AI-assisted matching system. The goal isn't flashy tech, it's careful verification. Cross-checking names, school records, photographs, and testimony to reconnect a child with their family. Think of it as a digital trace team, not a magic button. Coordination, work with intermediaries. Case lists don't move themselves. You need neutral carriers, humanitarian organizations, and sometimes third countries to verify identities and negotiate safe passage. That's where the coalition, 42 members, matters. It's not just numbers, it's roots, paperwork, and leverage. To understand the stakes, consider Ilya. He was 9 living in Mariupol when shelling destroyed his home and killed his mother. He was taken to occupied Donetsk. His family had no idea where he was until they recognized him in a hospital video. Determination and paperwork brought him back. But Ilya's story is not unique. For every child who returns, there are more who haven't been found, or who were given new papers, new names, and a new story that isn't theirs. Here's the typical pipeline for a lawful, safe return. 1. Identification. Families, teachers, neighbors, and aid groups flag a missing child. 2. Verification. Investigators confirm identity with pre-war records, relatives, and other evidence. This is slow by design. Getting it wrong could be devastating. 3. Negotiation. Third parties open channels to secure a release without turning the child into a bargaining chip. 4. Transit. The child moves through a safe corridor, often via a third country, to reach family or guardians. 5. Reunification. Identity is redocumented. Custody is formalized. 6. Aftercare. Trauma support, schooling, and legal reintegration. The mission isn't over at the airport. Common blockers, name changes, coerced citizenship, missing records, and often the politics of leverage. This is why lists matter, and why verification must be watertight. Skeptics raise 3 fair questions. First, will tougher sanctions backfire and hit Canadian firms more than perpetrators? Second, will making child returns a precondition stall broader negotiations? Third, can data tools be misused or misidentify a child? Canada's answer is a doctrine: deter and fortify. Deter abductors and their enablers with real costs, so children are never currency again. Fortify Ukraine's capacity, legal, humanitarian, and defensive, so returns don't depend on battlefield swings. None of this is easy, but the alternative is worse: a peace that leaves children behind. Judge the policy by outcomes, not speeches. Here's the scoreboard. Metric 1, verified returns, the number of children safely reunited with proof. Metric 2, enforcement. Are sanctions targeted, enforced, and coordinated with allies? Metric 3, credible lists. The first 339 is a start. Are those lists expanding and being validated? Metric 4, safe corridors. Are third country routes and mediators functioning without publicity stunts? Metric 5, aftercare. Are returning children getting schooling, counseling, and legal support to rebuild their lives? For Canada, success would mean 3 things. 1. Credibility, turning values into tangible outcomes. 2. Consistency, matching our human rights posture with enforcement that actually bites. 3. Coalition leadership, quiet, steady work that moves cases across borders instead of just moving headlines. In a war of maps and missiles, the simplest metric might be this: do children go home? If this helped you understand Canada's role, subscribe for more Canada in the World explainers. Next is Mark Carney and Diana Fox Carney's full raw speech.
Mr. President, dear Volodymyr, Madam First Lady, dear Olena, Diana, friends, it's an honor to be here. It's a tragedy that we must gather together. And it's a tragedy that we're all committed to reverse. You know, Mr. President, when I joined you a few weeks ago on Independence Day in Sophia Square, I emphasized that your struggle is our struggle. Your cause of freedom, democracy, sovereignty, and the human rights and dignity of every person, particularly children, is our cause, the cause of the 42 nations and more organizations gathered here today. I want to be clear at the outset of who's responsible for these horrors. Putin has caused this terrible tragedy that has claimed in the war lives of millions. He menaces the skies of Ukraine, threatens the cities, destroys the field. Putin has stolen Ukrainian children. Thousands of children have been abducted by Russia. Russia has repeatedly targeted the most vulnerable groups of children, including orphans, children with disabilities, children from poor families. Russian soldiers have entered classrooms and forcibly rounded up children, taking them to Russian schools and orphanages. To lose a child is every parent's nightmare. For the people of Ukraine, it's a horrifying reality. Après avoir bombardé une ville,
They bombed cities and children in Ukraine. They bombed Mariupol. Russian soldiers announced evacuations and brought civilians and children to occupied cities occupied by Russia.
Office has reported on these tactics, the tactics including to indoctrinate Ukrainian children. Children are being falsely labeled with Russian citizenship and passports. A decree to fast-track citizenship, the citizenship process for abducted children, has been signed by Putin himself. In the Russian school system, abducted Ukrainian children are exposed to war propaganda and given military patriotic training. Secondary schools are required to send lists of students aged 18 or older for conscription in the Russian armed forces. Each of these inhumane acts are violations of international law. And the 42 members of the International Coalition for the Return of Ukrainian Children are united in our mission. We're committed to the safe return of Ukrainian children, that this must be part of any negotiated settlement. As you mentioned, Mr. President, the coalition has provided Russia and Turkey with an initial list of 339 children to be brought home today. But this is just the beginning. There are thousands more children who've been illegally abducted, who've endured these horrors, who must return home. And as co-chair, Canada will intensify our work with Ukraine, with our European partners and the United States to secure the immediate unconditional return of Ukrainian children. We're investing millions in a HALAS system to support the use of AI in locating and identifying Ukrainian children who've been unlawfully deported. We welcome the recent powerful appeal to President Putin by the First Lady of the United States to consider the plight of children in ending this war. You know, decades ago, a U.S. president led a peace effort with Russia through nuclear disarmament and Reagan adopted the slogan, "Trust but verify." It couldn't be more different, Vladimir Putin and Mikhail Gorbachev. When peace comes, we can't trust but verify. We must deter and fortify. We must start to drive that peace with the sanctions you mentioned. Canada has sanctioned over 300 enablers of the Russian regime, over 3,000 individuals. We stand ready to reinforce those sanctions further with our European partners. And I welcome the President of the United States call today, repeated today, for secondary sanctions on Russia. Russia must be deterred, I'll finish with this, from ever thinking that they can threaten Ukraine's or Europe's freedom again. We have to fortify Ukraine's forces that have fought so valiantly and for so long. And by marshalling the strength of the coalition of the willing, President Stubb, I salute your leadership in that, dear Alex, we can help secure a durable peace. But that peace is only truly peace with the reunification of children with their family, with their homeland.
I'll turn to Diana Fox Carney, who is the spouse of the Prime Minister of Canada.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Sorry. It's a great honor to be with you today. Canada has proudly stood with Ukraine since the beginning of Russia's illegal invasion. Our country is home to 1.4 million people of Ukrainian descent. Canada and Ukraine are deeply connected. As my husband said in Sofia Square on Ukrainian Independence Day, your fight is our fight, your struggle is our cause, and your independence will be our victory. Canada will always stand in solidarity with Ukraine. As we have heard, in this war, Putin has targeted some of the most vulnerable populations. It is incomprehensible what the thousands of abducted Ukrainian children and their families are living through. As a mother, I simply cannot fathom the horror. What these children have endured is more than unjust, it is inhumane. I want to share with you the story of Ilya. At age 9, in the Russian shelling of Mariupol, Ilya saw his home destroyed and his mother killed before his eyes. He suffered injuries from the attack, and Russian soldiers took him to the Russian-occupied Donetsk. Doctors performed an operation to remove a fragment from his leg with no anesthesia. Ilya describes these doctors trying to turn him into a propaganda tool, telling him he must no longer say, "Glory to Ukraine," but instead, "Glory to Ukraine as part of Russia." No one in Ilya's family knew where he was. He was 9 years old, alone. Ilya's grandmother learned of his location only because she saw him in a Russian Federation video of the hospital. With her relentless determination, she secured his return. But the suffering that he endured cannot be undone. As his grandmother describes, he had a school, he had a home, he had a mother, and he lost all of that, his entire childhood. His story is the cost of this war, and tragically, as we have heard, his story is not unique. It is the story of thousands of Ukrainian children. It is what brings us here today. This is the tragedy and the mission that unites us all. I too would like to commend First Lady Melania Trump for addressing the return of Ukrainian children directly to Vladimir Putin in a letter hand-delivered by President Trump. Putin must understand that we know of his barbaric campaign of abducting children to indoctrinate them, forcing them into Russian schools where they must undergo military training, subjecting them to war propaganda, and attempting to erase their Ukrainian identity by forcing them to take Russian citizenship. They are not Russians. They are proud Ukrainian children, children who must be reunited with their families. For Canada, true peace requires security guarantees for Ukraine, and there is no peace without the return of these children. We will never erase the pain they have faced, but we can bring them home.